How are you going to pass the a.r.e. and become a registered architect? I'm architect Drew Paul Bell. In this video, I want to talk about how to do just that, how to pass the a.r.e. and get your registration here in the US. Alright, so the blanket advice, first of all, the blanket advice I give anyone who's working on their a.r.e. Is to focus on studying more than one study material at a time. More than one type of study material at a time. What do I mean by that? So when I was taking my first exams, I actually failed my first two. I started in the old 4.0 version of the exams right before it transitioned to the 5.0 version. So the people who I asked, like, hey man, how do you pass this? Like, how'd you do it? They all had some type of advice, like, oh, I studied this publisher, this study guide, and it wasn't as good as this one over here. And I heard conflicting advice. People told me both ones were the better ones. But what I eventually figured out is that all these people who passed the exams and had an opinion about which study material was the best one, they had all studied multiple study sources. They had all studied both of them. So sometimes it's important not to listen to what people say, but watch what they do. So what I realized was all these people had studied more than one source. So at the time, it was like Brightwood and Ballast, or it was Kaplan. Got bought by Brightwood and Ballast, I think, were the two major study guides at the time. The Ballast book, I think, is a pretty good book, and for me, I would recommend having that as like a backbone that lays everything out, and it's like one big study manual, so it covers all the different exams. It gives you a good perspective over the whole course of content that you're going to be tested on with the exams. I recommend that one, and then I recommend finding another one. Find one that works best for you. To me, it helped me a lot with my study process to have the book, and then also one that was like video, okay, like a video or audio, one that you can play. And the reason why we're going to roll into the second tip here is because you should also be studying for at least 20 minutes every single day when you commit to taking the exam. Now, is it necessarily 20 minutes every day? No, a lot of times it will be more. For me, I decided it was New Year's Day of 2017 when I decided that, this year my New Year's resolution was going to be that I was going to get my license and I was going to move to New York City. And I decided that every day, no matter what, I was going to spend 20 minutes at least on one of those two goals. And I meant that. And there was literally, I finished my exams, I think it was in May when I took my last test. And there was one day, I think it was in February, when I was sick. I got home from work and I just went to bed. I didn't dig around on the internet, on Instagram and YouTube for a long time. I literally just ate dinner, went to sleep, woke up the next day, and studied more the next day to make up for that missed day. There was no messing around for me. I said 20 minutes at least every single day. Most of the time, that turned into an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. But even the days when I really didn't want to, you know those days, because I'm sure that you've had them. Even the days I really didn't want to, I still sat my ass down at the desk and stared at the book for 20 minutes. And most of the time, even on the days I didn't feel like it, after 20 minutes, now I'd gotten warmed up and I was ready to keep going. And some days, 20 minutes staring at the book was all I could do, and that was just all I did. And so, going back to the video tip, what's nice about video content or something that you can just play, that it's easier on you on those days when it's hard, those times when it's hard to study, because you can hit play, it can be fed to you, and sometimes that's easier when you're lacking the motivation to really stare at the book and like drag yourself across the pages and learn the content. So having something that you can just play, for me, really helped, and that might be in the form of some paid product, because there's plenty of those out there now that are video or audio courses, or it may even be YouTube videos. For me, I remember studying for PDD and PPD, which are the two in 5.0 that I took, and they're beasts of an exam, and they just cover so much content. I went online and found YouTube channels that were talking about construction types that I needed to know more about. I found a guy that's talking about laying bricks and stone and masonry, and I was able to learn more from him and like really understand that type of construction method, because we didn't really use that in my firm. So all right, now I want to touch on, so we talked about studying multiple sources, not just one study manual, also finding a way to study like videos or something that you can just play, something that requires passive consumption for those times when you don't really feel like studying. So I also want to talk about talked about studying 20 minutes every day at least. I also recommend, with the one you can play that to yourself in the morning. I think it's important to start off each day saying, like, listen, I'm studying today. This is what this day is about. And for me, like, I always eat breakfast every morning, and I don't understand people who skip breakfast, but whatever, do your thing. I recommend that in the morning anyway, whether that be on your commute or doing breakfast, that you have that one that you can play, you play that. Right? You spend some time in the morning sitting with it. You don't have to be fully awake. I always hear people say that they have plans to wake up and read and study in the morning, or like wake up early in the morning and meditate. The meditating or reading in the morning, I don't see how you're going to do that and not fall asleep on Thursday. Like, maybe Monday you're well rested and Tuesday you're well rested, but by Thursday or Friday, I don't see that working out. So I think that, again, don't let me tell you what you can and can't do. But I would say probably plan on in the morning, while you're doing something you're going to do anyway, find a study material that you can play while you're doing something else, while you're going about your morning routine in one way or another. Another tip that I have is you have to understand where they're testing you from, okay? Like, just an example of what I'm trying to say here is, all right, so I was working at a single-family residential, at a firm doing mostly single-family residential. A lot of our work was wood frame construction, and it was small-scale, houses with families were the clients. But on the exam, you have to understand where they're asking questions from, or you actually don't need a license to do single-family houses. Really what they want to make sure you're capable of doing are larger projects for companies, for hospitals, for public works projects, for public projects. And so they're going to ask you questions coming from a different way, coming from a different place. And you have to understand the structure of how, for example, like loans work between how taxes might be, or bonds, public bonds, may go into funding a project. You have to understand all the different parties that could be involved in a big project that you may not have exposure to in a small project. You also have to understand the construction types that are going to be present in those projects, especially for the exams PDD and PPD. As my example of being working on primarily wood frame construction single-family houses. Let me tell you a few things we did. I did not have much experience with certain details. For example, like brick walls. A lot of the brick that we did in our projects, it was maybe existing, so we would just label it, feather in and match existing. We had notes to kind of cover, to say match what was already there, but we weren't building new construction brick walls very often, so I didn't know those details very well. We also never did parapets, and in the study materials, they talk about flashing, keeping water out. It's that ability, the ability to keep water out and deal with flashing and roofing details, that's unique with parapet designs, for example. And these are the sample details that they show in these study guides, and for good reason. This is the kind of thing that you need to know to design a building. So what I'm trying to say is that at your firm, look at the broader landscape of what an architect would have to do, and understand that there may be certain materials that you have less experience with that you're going to need to focus on studying those more. Or there may be types of projects where the dynamics and the parties that play, you may have less awareness about that type of dynamic, and so then maybe those are the chapters you got to focus on the study guide, or those are the YouTube videos you have to go look up. I mentioned earlier a YouTuber who I'll link up to his description. I'll link up to his channel. I forget the guy's name because it's been a while. But he was talking about masonry, and he was laying out masonry. He was going through, he was showing, listen, here's how we bring people on the job, and we teach them this, and here's what they did over here, but they did that 100 years ago, and you see this one's doing good, but here's a video where this building's falling down. And I knew that, hey, I have to learn more about masonry, so I went and looked up those YouTube videos. And so sometimes you can get that information that you're looking for by studying other places. So another tip on how to pass the a.r.e. is going to come down to scheduling. When do you schedule the exam? There's a lot of people online who will say, you have to figure out if you're a morning person or an afternoon person or whatever. I don't think that's a good idea. To me, my blanket advice is do not schedule tests in the morning. Schedule them in the afternoon. And some people are going to disagree with me on this, but hear me out on this, because a lot of people stress out about these exams. So what happens the night before? They can't fall asleep. They're studying a little bit, they're trying to get in some last minute cramming, preparation ready to go. They're nervous, they can't sleep well, they gotta wake up to get to the exam location at like 8 a.m., which means that they have to leave their apartment at 7 or something to beat traffic. And now they have to get up at 5 or 6 to get breakfast, maybe study a little bit. You can't go to sleep till midnight, you're waking up at 5 or 6. You're setting yourself up for disaster. Here's why. Because you're taking these exams and these questions are tricky, okay? There's a lot of people complaining about that online. Don't waste your time complaining about it. Here's the deal. They are tricky, so figure out how to deal with it. You might be very well prepared, but you can study everything all you want, but if you're not prepared to perform on test day, then all that preparation goes out the window. There's going to be a certain percentage. If you're not well rested, let's say we got all these questions, a certain percentage of them are going to be tricky questions. You're probably going to miss a higher percentage of those tricky questions if you're not well rested. If you've gotten a full night's sleep, then you're more likely to get that chunk of questions correct, which means that you're more likely to pass. And we can complain about whether or not this is fair, a fair way to test people or not, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. We still have to jump over this hurdle. So I recommend scheduling your exams in the afternoon as often as possible. Like for me, I would take a test-taking day that was a little bit more inconvenient for me, a little bit earlier or a little bit later than I really wanted to take the exam at. I would take a later date in order to get an afternoon time slot, because I would go to sleep at night. Maybe I'm the type of person who wants to stay up a little bit late. I'm more of a night person, so I'm gonna have some trouble sleeping. But if I schedule it for 1 in the afternoon or at noon, I can go to sleep a little bit later. I can wake up at 9 or 10. I can get up, get some breakfast, go to the gym. And I recommend doing that, by the way. Working out, staying active, not only on test day, but also while you're studying. Okay, because the mind is the body and the body is the mind. You have to keep you should keep your whole life in order, especially during this time when you're taking the exams. So if you schedule it for later on in the day, you can sleep later, you're going to be more well rested, you're going to get yourself in the right headspace to then go into the test-taking prometric testing site and perform better. Also, inherent in this is the idea that you're also taking the whole day off work. And hopefully you're getting paid time off for this, but even if you're not, I still recommend that you take the whole day off, because I remember on my first test or second test, it was definitely the first test. I took it in the morning, didn't get enough sleep, couldn't sleep the night before, didn't pass, but I didn't know it back then because, you wouldn't find out for a week back in the 4.0 version. And then I got back to the office and I was going to work in the office, but my brain was fried. Like I wasn't even being productive. And you're not going to be productive after an exam like that. I'll say most people won't. So I recommend, again, take the whole day off, schedule it in the afternoon, and even test a week later or a week earlier if you have to. Like I really believe in the afternoon time slot. And some people may disagree with me on this, but this is my recommendation that I give. Let's talk about mindset. What kind of mindset are you going to take into the exam? I hear a lot of people complaining about, or I hear a lot of people who are worried about test-taking anxiety. And this is something that, I don't have a lot of experience with. I'll say I haven't suffered from very much. And one of the reasons why I think I don't is because of the mentality that I take when going into an exam. Psychologists say that there are one of two mindsets you can have. That's one of predator, or you're thinking like prey. When I was in high school, I had this teacher I had an English teacher, and he was kind of joking around and joking with us one time. We had an exam coming up, and he was joking, and he said, "By the way, I heard that the exam has been talking shit about you guys. The exam thinks he's gonna kick your ass. What do you guys think? What do you guys think?" And everybody was like, "Oh no, we're gonna get that test. That test is worried about us." And he was kind of joking. We were all kidding around, but I think that actually hits on a very important point. Are you looking at this exam like it's the predator and you're the prey? I didn't do that. Look, I look at this exam, listen, I didn't pass the exam a few times. I failed my first 2 attempts. I failed a third one after I transitioned to 5.0. Once I did PDD, and failed that one the first time. And I could tell, like that, the first 10 questions hit me in the mouth. I was not good with those. Like that one, it was ridiculous. It was hard. So I failed that one. Talked to a buddy of mine who actually happens to be a high school teacher. And I was talking with him. He said, "Oh, how'd the exam go?" I said, "Oh man, I didn't pass." He goes, "Oh no, man, that sucks. Like, are you gonna get to retake it?" And I was like, yeah, I have to wait 60 days and whatever. And then he was like, oh, well, I mean, you can't really fail an exam you get to retake. I mean, it's not like high school, because think about it from his perspective. He has students who they take a test. This is like back in school, if you fail the test, it goes in the grade book and that's that. You're probably not going to get to retake it. But that's not the case here. You get to retake this exam. And here's why you should feel like the predator, not the prey. You can adapt. That exam can't adapt. You're going to go and you're going to take that exam one time. Look, they have a question bank where you're going to get maybe some slightly different questions, but there's not going to pull any tricks on you that you haven't already seen. You're going to get to adapt. You get to take this again and again. You're a free-thinking human being, and your willpower and your creativity is stronger than the willpower and creativity of a test. You're going to beat it eventually. You just have to have enough time. And so even if you're not good at it the first time, it doesn't matter. You're going to get to take it again. And I also recommend it in all this, the only argument against it is that, oh, well, it's going to cost money. Fine, but listen, you're going to get a pay raise after you get these exams done. So do you want that pay raise now, or do you want that pay raise later? If you wait 5 years, you wait the 5-year rolling clock. All right, imagine all the time you could have made during those 5 years if you had gotten your license earlier. That's going to more than pay for the cost of taking the exams or the study guides. So it's not feasible to wait too long to do this. It's not feasible to take forever. Get it done faster. Don't be afraid to take an exam and fail it. Also, to me, like the only unrenewable resource, because you can always make more money, especially once you have this license, you can make more money. But what you can't get is you can't get more time. No one in the world gets to buy more time. Right? One day is all going to run up, and that's that. So consider the time as the most important factor. I was talking to someone not long ago, and they were saying, oh, I'm thinking about taking the exam in like 2 or 3 months. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I said to them, like, listen, if you take the exam today and you fail the exam, you still have to wait 2 months. So you might as well take it now and then get to deal with it later, and you're still done in the same amount of time. So to me, time is the main metric, not money. And I understand that that's maybe harder for some people to say, but when you really look at the long-term scheme of things, you can make more money once you get that license, and you'll probably make up for the cost of getting it sooner if you get it done sooner. So again, going into this, so I hope that helps you tweak your mindset, because to me, that also feeds back into the idea of being more on the offensive, being more on the attack. I looked at those exams like I was going to go in and I was going to dominate that exam. That was an opportunity for me to win. And I would get very almost competitive about the exam. Not competitive towards anyone else, but just between me and that challenge in front of me. And I viewed that as an opportunity to succeed. And I recommend that you do the same thing. Look at this like, it's not that you have to study for this exam. You get to study for this exam. You get to study for this stuff. Some people are like, how do you find the motivation to study? I actually like this stuff, I actually enjoy it. I think it's kind of fascinating how buildings go together. And I remember like studying for this stuff and feeling like, this is actually really cool. Like I wouldn't have taken the time otherwise to study and really figure out how this stuff works. And I maybe would have figured it out eventually through my time in the profession. But all the stuff that I was studying to pass the a.r.e., that was all stuff I ought to have known anyway. That's stuff that I want to know to be more successful in the profession. It's going to make my job easier. That's going to make my life easier in my career. So not only that, but it's also like, it's just plain interesting to me. Like human beings have developed this, and we've engineered this system for us to be outside of the elements, and survive. And our lives are way more comfortable, way better for having done this. And it's kind of fascinating that anyone figured this out in the first place. And they already figured it out. All I have to do is read the book. I have to just like remember some of these things. And I'm actually fascinated by the way that they figured it out, because it really requires ingenuity and engineering to make that stuff work. Especially coming from like the exams that I finished last, which was the PDD and PPD. Beyond that, also the way that businesses function. If you're talking about managing employees and billable rates and all that stuff, that's still an interesting system to figure out, And so don't look at it like, oh, I have to study for these exams. You get to study for these exams. You get to improve as an architect, as a designer. You get to move up and become more powerful within your firm, within your capabilities to do what you can do for your clients. So it's important to have the right mindset coming into this. And I think that that's important for you to work on. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who look at these exams like they're the victim. They think that, oh, NCARB asks unfair questions and it's not fair. And then they just complain, and then they're not going to succeed. And whose fault is that? Whose problem is that? It's the person who doesn't pass. That's their problem. And, also in terms of, I can't talk about what I saw on the exam, but I will say that I saw questions where I could tell what the trick was, because I was well rested, because I was well studied. I saw questions where I was like, I know the trick you're playing here. I'm looking at the 4 or 5 options, and I see why you want me to pick this one, but it's actually this other one down here. You want me to be confused by these 2, but I know why it's this one. And I saw multiple situations like that. And so you have to imagine how many people are out here who they didn't figure that out. They didn't see the trick because they weren't well educated about it enough. They didn't catch the difference. And now what do? They go to NCARB's blog and then they complain that there's no right answer to these exam questions. Nah, man, really, you just weren't studied enough to figure it out. And I saw multiple questions like that. So listen, I don't put a lot of stock into the people who are complaining. The fact that it can be done means it can be done. It means you can do it. And so, is it hard? Of course it's hard. Are there tricky questions? Of course there's tricky questions. But guess what's going to happen in the profession? You're going to have a contractor call you up, and he's going to say something like, hey, what color are we painting the front door? And then you're going to say, I don't know, let me go decide. And then you're going to go look at the front door. You're going to look at the photos and make some decisions. All right, let's paint it this. But in reality, we already said we're not painting the front door. Front door's fine. Front door got renovated like a year ago. It's all good. They might call you up and say, hey, what size of screws are we using on the deck? And the answer is, we're not using screws, we're using nails. Contractors and people are going to call you up and they're going to ask you questions. They're going to end up being leading questions. And it's not that they are trying to trick you, right? It's not that these contractors or these owners or these building officials are trying to trick you on something. It's just that they're calling you up with something and they think that they're helping you by giving you some context. They're trying to ask a more clear question, but then what ends up happening is they're kind of leading you in a particular direction, and you have to have the self-awareness to realize, hey, no, that's not the direction we're going in. It's totally different. Similar tricks are going to be the ones that come up on the exam, and I actually think that a lot of those are appropriate. Now, I saw 1 or 2 that I think were silly, but nonetheless, doesn't matter. You got to be aware of these types of things anyway. A lot of the work we actually do in the profession ends up being, checking and coordinating with bids, with engineered documents, and making sure that everything actually matches. Sometimes it is looking for those types of mistakes, and is being aware about stuff on that level. So all this is to say that you have to go into these exams with the right mindset. Look at it like, listen, there's going to be some tricks, but guess what? I have to be ready for tricks in the profession anyway. We're gonna have to jump over some hurdles to get this exam. Fine, that's the way it goes. We're gonna deal with it. Oh, it's a hard exam? Cool. That exam's worried about me. I'm not worried about that exam because I'm gonna win eventually. If it's not this time, it's gonna be next time. If it's not next time, it's the time after. And be intelligent about the way you study, what you focus on, when you study, and taking seriously studying consistently every single day. Because as Aristotle said, he said, we are what we do repeatedly. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. Okay, so with that, I want to leave you, and I hope that this video helps. I hope that this helps you maneuver on through your professional goals and get your a.r.es tackled. So I hope this helps, and I will talk to you next time.